Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So, in today's tutorial, we'll learn how to create our first OpenGL window. Yes, from today's tutorial onward, we'll start our programming. So, I hope you have set up GLFW and GLAD till now and are using Visual Studio for coding. Well, before getting into coding, there are certain things that some of you may know, some of you don't. But to be on the same page, let's see what are these things. So buffers, yes. So in computer science, a buffer is a region of physical memory storage used to temporarily store data while it is being moved from one place to another. To give you an example, RAM is a type of buffer. Also, on your graphic card or motherboard, there are various onboard buffers also. So keep in mind this stuff, we'll use them later. Now let's understand the concept of double buffers. First of all, basically the rendering or the calculation of what to draw on the screen is done in a buffer that is somehow connected to the screen. While drawing on the screen, basically the pixels are drawn one by one, usually from left to right and top to bottom. Now if drawing and rendering takes place simultaneously, what happens is the screen may contain some artifacts like the screen may flicker or the image is not smooth. So to tackle these problems, we use the concept of double buffers. Basically, we use two buffers in place of one buffer. The front buffer or the first buffer contains the final output image and all the calculation happens at the second buffer or the back buffer. Now, as soon as all the rendering is finished, we swap the front buffer with the back buffer. Is it okay? So, now let's get into the programming part. Well, the first step is to include our header files. So let's include glad, glad.h, hash include GLFW 3 and our favorite C++ header file, iostream. Well, note here one point that always include glad before GLFW. Simple reason because all of your OpenGL headers are contained inside glad and GLFW in its header uses some of the OpenGL header files. Is it okay? Now, the next step is writing our main function. Inside the main, the first step is initializing the GLFW. We do this via the function called GLFW init. Now, the second step is basically telling GLFW so what sort of window we want it to draw for ourselves. So basically, we give GLFW various type of hints to render itself appropriate window for our own. So we use this function called GLFW window hint. Now it takes two arguments. So the first one is what is the hint and second one is what is the value you want to set for that. Now let me tell you that here in our tutorials we'll be using the OpenGL 3.3 version. 3.3 because it is the first to implement the core profile mode of OpenGL and most of the graphic cards or integrated graphics support this version of OpenGL. So let's hint GLFW about that. So we'll write GLFW context version major, that is before the decimal, that is 3. Now, GLFW window hint GLFW context version minor, that is after this decimal, that is also 3. Now let's tell GLFW that we want to render our core profile mode. So we'll write GLFW OpenGL profile and GLFW OpenGL core profile. Now for the program to run on Apple or Mac, you also have to include this GLFW hint. So that is GLFW OpenGL forward compat comma GL true. So just uncomment this for the program to run on Apple or Mac. Now the next step is actually creating our GLFW window. What I mean by that is we'll create a variable of this user defined data type in GLFW called the GLFW window. GLFW window will actually create a pointer variable of this type and initialize this using a function called glfw create window. Now as you can see here, it takes 5 arguments. So the first two is what is its width and height. So basically you might have heard about this term called resolution of the screen. To give you an example, currently my resolution is 1600 by 900. That means that in width I have 1600 pixels and in height I have 900 pixels. So to give a better understanding, let's create a 800 by 600 window. The third argument is should be the name or the title of the window. So let's call it hello window. Now about the fourth and the fifth argument, we'll talk about them in our later tutorials, not to worry about. But currently you can set its value to null. Now let's tell GLFW that we want to use this window for our further applications. So we'll use this function called glfw make context current window. After that, let's load our glad. So we'll use this function glad load glloader. We'll cast it to this type glad load proc glfw get proc address. So about this function, basically you don't have to learn much about this function, but just learn this function literally. Basically it do not have any other use rather than just loading our glad and just learn it straight away. Now let's talk about something called as viewport. So in OpenGL we set this viewport using the function called glViewport. So as you can see here, it takes 4 values as its arguments. Well, to better understand what is this viewport, let's visualize this a little bit. So let's assume that this is our window, our OpenGL window. Now I'll write a coordinate system with this left bottom corner of the window as the origin, and 1 unit of this coordinate system is 1 pixel. So basically this point will be 800 600 for our window. Now basically the viewport is the area in which OpenGL can render stuff. So its size can be equal to the window or its size can be less than the window also. So basically if I want to get a viewport of let's say 600 by 400, in this or in our window. So I can visualize this something like this. Obviously, we have to specify that its left bottom corner is at the location 0, 0. Is it okay? Let's get back to our code. So the first two arguments are basically the left bottom corner of the viewport. So I can set its value to 0 and let's make it equal currently to our window. We will understand its importance in the next tutorial where we will render actual triangles in OpenGL. Currently, just understand the concept of viewport. Now comes the most important part of any graphic programming, that is called a render loop. So basically, all of your rendering will occur inside this loop, that is all of your calculation will occur inside this loop. Just a fun fact, you might have heard about this term called FPS in games or various applications. It stands for the frames per second. So basically, the number of iterations this render loop makes in 1 second is called the FPS. Basically, each iteration of this render loop is called a frame. Is it okay? Now, here we'll use a while loop and we'll use this function called GLFW window should close to govern this while loop. Now, it takes argument as a window and its value can be 0 or 1. So its value can be 0 or 1. So basically we can toggle this value of this variable called window should close in a OpenGL context. We'll see how can we do that. So inside the render loop currently we require only two functions. The first one is called the GLFW swap buffers window. Basically it swaps the front buffer and back buffer. We just talked about the double buffers. Is it okay? And the second function is GLFW poll events. So this function basically accounts for any events that occur during this iteration. Events such as maybe taking input from a keyboard, input from a mouse, or resizing of the window, or moving of the cursor. All such events are managed using this GLFW poll events function. Now let's summarize our GLFW using the function GLFW terminate and return 0. So let's try running our small program. Now, if you see a black window with this hello window name on your screen, you have done good till now. So generally at this stage there occurs some general problems. So an error like with the expansion of L and K might occur at this stage. It's called a linking error and it basically occurs because you might have not set up GLAD or GLFW properly. So if LNK error occurs, set up GLAD and GLFW properly. Now another type of error might occur at this stage called something like access violation error. So basically this error occur if you let's interchange the flow of the program. For example, let's say you interchange this function and wrote it before GLFW make context current. You need to understand this thing that the flow of the program is important here. For example, let's revise that. The first thing we want to do is initialize GLFW. The second thing is telling GLFW what type of window we want to draw. The third thing is creating an actual window object. The fourth thing is making this window a current context. And the fifth thing is loading our GLAD. After that, you can play with the functions as you want, like the GL viewport or the render loop, all that. But these 5 steps are important and learn the flow of the program. Okay? Now, you might have noticed one thing here, that when I created this window, I have to use this icon to close it. So we can do this task as well using our keyboard. So let's see how we can do that. Also, another thing, that these two functions always occur at the bottom of render loop. Okay. Now we'll create a if statement. Now to get a keyboard input in GLFW, we use this function called GLFW getKey. Its first argument is the window, and the second argument is what is the key. So again, write GLFW key, and you can see here that I have various options for the key. So I'll use the enter function, enter key, for currently is equal to GLFW press. So as the output of this GLFW getKey function, you can get basically two types of output here. So that is your GLFW press or your GLFW release. So if you want to cut. Now if you want something to happen after releasing a certain key, then we'll use this GLFW release here. Or if you want something to happen after pressing a certain key, we'll use GLFW press. Okay? Inside this if, we'll write the function called GLFW set windows should close current window and its value, that is 1. So you might wonder that we can simply just use a random variable here that equal to 0 and set its value to equal to 1 here, but it's a convention in GLFW, so we'll use that only. Okay, so let's try running our program. So yes, the window closed when I pressed enter. So you can also experiment this on your own PC. Okay, now we have created a black dull window. Well, actually, let's color our window a little bit. So basically, to color our window, we'll use two functions called a GL clear color and GL clear. So let's understand this GL clear first. GL clear. So it takes input as one of the buffer. So its input can be a color buffer, a depth buffer, or a stencil buffer. But currently we are just concerned with the color buffer, so we'll use this GL color buffer bit here. So basically what this function do is it clears the color buffer bit by the color we set using the GL clear color. So by default its value is set to black, or that is 000. So we can actually set its value to with what value it should clear the color buffer. that is clear color. Now, it takes 4 values as its arguments. As you can see here, the first 3 are the RGB values. So, as you may know that any color can be written as a combination of red, green and blue. For example, the pure red is obtained by 1.0f red, 0.0f green, 0.0f blue. Now about this fourth argument, that is the alpha value, it's an interesting one, but we'll see what is it in the later tutorials. Currently you can set its value to anything but 0. So I'll set its value to 1.0f. You might have noticed that I have used this f here. So basically in coding, if you want to explicitly mention that this value is a floating type of value, then we use this f here. So it's a bit of convention you can use, or it's your choice, not a big deal. Now let's try running our program. Tada! Yes, if you got a red screen like mine, you have done everything good till now. Let's close it. And that's it for the tutorial. So I hope you have learned something new today, and well, I have prepared some programs for you, my audience, to solve before this next tutorial. So let's see what are these problems. So the first program is try to play with the input of the keyboard which you used using the function called GLFW get key. Basically, while rendering, try to do this that if I press R plus the up key, the red component of the RGB should increase. If I press R plus down key, the red component of RGB should decrease, and similar for blue and green. So basically, it will make familiar you with the function GLFW get key. And the second program I want you to create is try to change this RGB values in some time related pattern. I hope you have read the GLFW documentation I mentioned in the last tutorial. Anyway, if you haven't read it, and it contains some functions which are time related. To give you a hint, there's this function called GLFW get time. So try with the function what is this, and in the next tutorial I'll give the solution of this programs, don't worry, but try to solve it on your own. And remember one thing, that to learn the flow of the simple program, try to write these two programs from zero. Okay, so that's it for today. If you like the video, press the like button and subscribe for more such tutorials. Thank you.